Welcome to Conquering Your Clownfish, a podcast dedicated to transforming disabilities into special abilities. I'm your host, Brady Murray. Welcome to the Conquering Your Clownfish podcast. It is my honor to be able to introduce our very special guest today. Ashley Ashcraft comes to us from North Carolina, where she resides with her husband, Tim, and her 4 sweet children. She is an author, speaker, military spouse, homeschool mom, and a nationally recognized educator. In 2023, Ashley gave birth to her daughter, Finley, who has Down syndrome. Even though the initial diagnosis came as a surprise, Finley has been the greatest blessing to her and her family. Ashley, it's great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for what you do. I've loved learning as I learn about Down syndrome, learning about everything you do as well.
It is a fun journey. We truly are the lucky few to be part of this unique journey of disabilities, isn't it? Isn't it unique?
Yes.
Wonderful. So I am super excited to visit with you. In fact, I've got a number of things that I wanted to visit with you about. And ironically enough, the thing that I'd love to start with actually doesn't have really anything to do with Down syndrome or disabilities. But I think in the end, we're going to be able to tie it in really nice. So I'm super curious, just in relation to your current opportunity and blessing of being a military spouse. And so first and foremost, I want to thank your husband, Tim, for his service. And amazing man that he is. The little bit that I've been able to learn about him in researching and preparing for this podcast, he is fantastic and is an amazing man. But I would love to learn more about this. In fact, you're actually authoring a book that's coming out, is it in August that I believe? That is specifically talking about this. And so being a spouse in the military, could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Tim is coming up on 17 years in the military. And so as we reach kind of the end of our journey here, as we hit that 20-year mark, we've noticed the same story everywhere we go. And it's that every military spouse, more or less, is just exhausted and filled with resent and just not equipped to do this journey well because nobody really taught us. So it's felt like we're kind of scrambling, and we've moved 12 times in that time. And I had 4 children, and then just all the complications that come with moves and setting up a new life everywhere you go. And so I'm really praying that this book will just be like a one-stop shop that military spouses can go, or fiancés that are getting ready to step into this journey and just say, here's my complete guide for how I do everything in a military marriage, from intimacy to deployments to combat trauma to walking with my friends who lose their spouse, because that's bound to happen, to parenting solo over and over again. And so I'm really praying that it's just a place for military spouses to feel emboldened that, like, I have been called to this role as a military spouse, not that I'm just like being drug along to each post, but I have an assignment just like my husband does at each of these duty stations.
That is beautiful. There's so much to be able to just ponder as it relates to those responsibilities and all of that weight that comes on your shoulders, because that's an additional weight, an additional responsibility.
Yes.
But what a beautiful thing to look at that as it truly is, as a calling. That's a role that you have, that you're taking on, similar to what Tim is taking on. He also has a calling. He has a work to be able to do. And your calling as well is very much in alignment with what he is doing. So what a beautiful thing. And I mean, my heart just goes out, and I have so much respect and admiration for those in the armed services and the work that they are doing. But what a beautiful perspective that you bring, that it is a team effort, and that Tim is able to do the work that he does as a result of you being able to do the work that you do. So that's wonderful. You say the book is coming out in August?
August 13th it comes out, which is really fun. It's a total God thing, but one of my friends, Bree Carroll, she founded, it's called Military Marriage Day. And a lot of governors have signed this in and everything. And so that is on August 14th. So it comes out the day before, which is fun timing.
Meant to be.
Yeah.
It's meant to be. Yeah. Well, congratulations on your upcoming book. And congratulations on all the work that you've done. I'm sure that you truly are a wonderful example and very qualified to be able to promote, to write this book.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that transitions us perfectly into really your story in relation to your entry into Down syndrome. Could you share with us a little bit just in regards to your experience? I mean, this is recent. This is in 2023 that Finley was born. And so share
Yes.
with us a little bit in regards to the diagnosis and just that entry into the disability world.
Well, my entry was something that I hope is different for other women, but it was not as negative as I'm learning it is most of the time. So I received a phone call because my husband and I were planning on doing a gender reveal. That wasn't even a thing when our other three kids were born. So he's like, we got to do it. We got to hit the golf ball and have it explode with pink or blue. And so he was all into this. And our doctor had said, well, we don't wait till the ultrasound to tell you the gender anymore. Now we need to do a blood test to tell you the gender. So we did that at 10 weeks. And that's all we were anticipating
Yeah.
is just picking up a card saying that we were having a boy or girl. But instead, a nurse had called and said, I need to tell you that along with your gender, we found out that there's a 9 out of 10 chance that your baby has Down syndrome. And there was no preempting. It was just out of the gate. I was alone at home. And unfortunately, and I feel bad about this, I wasn't plugged into the special needs community. So I was ignorant about Down syndrome. And so for me, it was really shocking and devastating. And I called my husband and I couldn't even get out the words.
Yeah.
And he had thought we had lost the baby or like another family member had died because I was so upset on the phone and I couldn't even speak. And so once I told him we had Down syndrome, he's like, oh, or she had likely a Down syndrome. He's like, oh, everything's going to be okay. And he rushed home to comfort me. But as I learned from a lot of other, once we started getting connected in the community, a lot of other moms that I'd met had asked, did the doctor suggest abortion? Because that's what the doctor told me to do. So thankfully that didn't happen to us, but it was an abrupt diagnosis.
Yeah, no doubt. I've actually loved the content that you are creating and sharing on your social media channels just about the blessing and a message to mothers who may be expecting and just that message of hope and a message of embrace this with everything that you got because it is so beautiful. And yes, it's hard, but it is such a beautiful journey. So Finley is the youngest of 4 children. How's she doing?
She's doing fabulous. She just continues to amaze her therapists every week and her doctors every week. And we just contributed so much to prayer. She has this beautiful following of what we call Finley's fighters that have prayed for her since the day she's been born. And she's just beating all the odds in amazing ways. So she's doing wonderful.
I would love to know, I'm actually really curious about this as far as from the military standpoint, you've moved 12 times over the last, how many years did you say? 17 years?
17 years.
Okay,
yes.
so 12 times in the last 17 years. You're 17. Statistically speaking, most likely there will be another move, do you think, between now and the next few years?
So if I've learned anything from the military, it's that life is unpredictable. So right now we are planning to be here for 2 more years, but my husband just put in his application to be an Army astronaut. So he says it's a 1 in a million shot, but if that is something that God has planned for us, that'll be a move to Texas soon. But if not, we all have 1 more year when our time is up here, and he may apply to do an ROTC position back home in Arizona where we're from, or we might try to stay here 1 more year for stability and finish out retirement here.
And so in receiving therapies and receiving early intervention, all of the things that comes with a diagnosis of a child with Down syndrome, and obviously welcoming that child, how has that been? I mean, you're not necessarily in home, although you've been there for a little while, but what has that been like for you?
All the therapies and doctor's appointments, we've been really blessed that we're near a large hospital. So we're near Duke. And so that has been a big blessing. Right before we came here, like weeks before, we were planning to go to Hawaii. And then God knew Finley was coming, but we didn't. And we found out a couple weeks before, just kidding, you're going to North Carolina. And now we feel like it's such a huge blessing because they're the number 2 cardiac unit in the country. And so far, Finley has not had to have heart surgery, but it remains on the table, just kind of a month-by-month basis. So we feel really lucky where we're at. We're plugged in with the CDSA so that we're getting all her therapies. And then in the military, there's a program called EFMP, And you have to enroll your children in that program so that anywhere the military moves you, they have to ensure that they offer all of the specialties and therapies that your child needs. Otherwise, they won't send you there, which is comforting to know if we do have to move.
No, most definitely. So Tim has been on deployment before. He's been to war. Is that
Yes,
correct?
that's correct.
So
Twice.
can you share with us about those experiences and how you managed through those, how you thrived through those? And I'd love to see how that experience prepared you for that diagnosis of Down syndrome and what correlations you saw there.
So he was deployed when our first daughter was 2 months old. He deployed to Afghanistan, and he was in he's an Apache pilot, and he was in some of the most dangerous valleys there. So 2 months in, he was shot down in Afghanistan and called me to let me know that a rocket propelled grenade missed the foot of his aircraft missed the nose of his aircraft by 1 foot. And they had 15 bullets that went through their aircraft and thankfully just missed him and his co-pilot. And so that was our introduction to war. And he still had 10 months to go after that happened.
Oh.
So, and continued to have active engagements. And so what I wasn't fully prepared for is the reintegration, because what you see in movies and Hollywood is this like very romantic reunion with a couple. But when a soldier goes through something traumatic, there's like physically changes happen in the brain. And so I've spent since then, 16 years trying to navigate and all the changes that happen in a marriage when you go through something traumatic. And so it's traumatic for both partners. And so that's something I really put an emphasis on in the book too, is just marriage is it is a huge blessing and gift that God gives us, but there are also challenges that we go through, but we can draw closer to each other and closer to Christ, as that's a huge part of our relationship, as you manage things that are traumatic. And so that's something that we've walked through and had a lot of our friends walk through, and some of their husbands haven't come home. And so then when we had Finley, I feel like the military had prepared us in the sense that we've walked through trauma before and we knew what to do. We knew this time you reach out for help right away. So we talked to the social workers right away. We talked to the genetic counselors right away. I plugged into community right away and asked, people would say, I know a mom with child with Down syndrome. Do you want me to connect you? Yes, yes, yes. Because I know community is a really important part of going through challenging things, going through life anyways. And so I think the military had taught me all those different things.
That is beautiful counsel. And again, just my respect and admiration for not only what Tim does, but for what you do as well.
Thank you.
Commendable. You're right. That is very applicable. And oftentimes when we receive a diagnosis, one of the things that is natural to want to do, but is not the best thing, is to truly just hide, to just go and to take that grieving, to take those feelings and just bottle them up and to go and to hide, when in reality, the best thing to do would be to seek community and to open up and seek that support. As you received that diagnosis and you began to experience the community with Down syndrome, and as you'd shared, you'd never had any exposure to the special needs community before that. What did you find? And how was that experience for you?
It was really beautiful. And I felt like it was such a gift, this moment that had gone from complete fear that as I pushed into it became such a gift, that the North Carolina Down Syndrome Alliance, we were plugged in with them really quickly, and they provided me a mentor family. And that was wonderful. So within a week, I was meeting another mom who had a child with Down syndrome and getting to hold her little baby and develop friendship and community and have somebody to speak to about, okay, well, which doctor do you go to and which cardiologist do you go to? And, I'm having these issues in my pregnancy. She just knew the answer. So that was really helpful. And then we had the same thing in our military community, that different families invited us over for dinner who had a child with Down syndrome. And it just opened up this whole world that I didn't know was right around us.
As you've been involved in this community now is Finley has she completed a year yet, or is she
July 1st, she'll be
okay?
one.
July 1st, perfect. Big
Yeah.
celebration in your
Yeah.
household on July 1st. Big
Yes.
numero uno. As you've been
Yeah.
involved in this community, you found ways to be able to also pay it forward. I mean, you're only months into this now with Finley at least being born, but have you found opportunities to be able to pay it forward and find other ways to, in essence, serve that pain that you know best?
I hope so. There's been several moms that have reached out on Instagram that I've sort of be like mentoring them, and they're just, we're only a few months apart and their babies may be just a few months, but they'll send me a message and say, hey, we're going through this, or my baby has this heart issue, and can you help me? And so that's been really neat to connect with women that way to mentor. And then also, I just love organizations like yours and like Rod's Heroes and Rising Kites and Jack's Basket that I wanted to help, with donations and fundraisers and that kind of thing. So I know we recently got an email that Jack's Basket's doing like burgers and baskets this summer. And so I was thinking we'll tie that in with Finley's birthday probably and have a fundraiser for them. But just want to get the word out and let people know about the resources that are out there so they don't have to be afraid and don't have to feel alone.
Yeah, that's one thing with Rod's Heroes, our team. In fact, they were just saying this earlier today as I was visiting with them in preparation for a podcast, that you have been what we like to describe as an unstoppable advocate. You're somebody that truly is ready and willing to be able to help and lift where you stand, to be able to pay it forward and help other individuals. So I commend you for that. Oftentimes it
Thank
takes
you.
a little while, oftentimes years, for families to be able to settle, to be able to, take care of things on the home front and then be able to start to pay it forward. I know for Andrea and I, it was multiple years before we really felt like we could begin to get involved. But for you and what you're doing with Tim is phenomenal. So I thank you for what you're doing there.
Thank you. I think that's another thing I've learned in the military, and a lot of other military spouses will tell you the same thing. It's like when you get into a new community, you just dive head in and, head first. And it's like right away, you just have to become best friends with your neighbor because you don't know anybody else and you don't have a family around you. And, they have to be, it's like, hi, I'm Ashley. Will you be the emergency contact for my child? And so I think that's kind of how it's been for Finley too. Like, okay, here's my new community, jump right in. And, but
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'd love to hear how this has been for Tim. All right. How has this been for Tim? Oftentimes the dad is one that maybe struggles a little more than the mom at times, and vice versa. Mom will struggle more than dad at times, but how has this been for Tim?
he has been a rock throughout this. So we talk about like taking turns in our marriage and different situations that we've been in. And he was definitely the rock this time around. So from the beginning, that first phone call, he's like, everything's going to be okay. And he just had complete peace about it, that this is a gift from God. And God has, all my head knowledge kind of went away. But he kept firm with everything that God said about Finley, that God had created her, wonderfully and remarkably and for his kingdom purposes. And sorry.
Yeah.
And so he was just throughout this whole thing, just very confident that God knew what he was doing and we could trust him, just like every other challenge that we've been through before.
So on July 1st, Finley will turn 1. As you
Yes.
look forward, you're going to have more years. You're going to have many milestones and many wonderful opportunities to be able to see and be part of her life. You've probably seen and had interaction with even adults that have Down syndrome, and you've seen that beautiful synergy and that relationship between a caregiver and their child that has a disability. As you look into the future, what are you most looking forward to as Finley grows and as Finley even becomes an adult and you continue down this journey?
That's a great question. I think as I posted videos on Instagram, there have been so many family members who are further along in this journey whose sister, brother or child is an adult, and they over and over the comments are that they are the light of their family. They are the individual with Down syndrome is the one that brings their family together and the one that brings the joy. And so I'm just excited to see that the relationships continue with my children and with Finley and just all of our family. They're all so smitten with her, and they couldn't be more all in with her. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, she's a pretty easy one to fall in love with.
Yeah.
She's beautiful, just
Thank you.
beautiful. I can attest to that. And so I have two boys that have Down syndrome. Nash is going to be 17 on July 6th, so just a few days after, and Cooper is 12. Can't wait to be 13, actually.
Yeah.
We're gonna have lots of teenagers soon enough. But that's absolutely the truth. Those two are the glue to our family. Adoption has been a big part of our life. And most recently, we welcomed 4 children from Colombia into our family. And they are, older in age, they're teenagers, and at least the oldest 3 are, and the younger one is 11, although she's very well could be a teenager with how unique a personality she has.
Yeah.
And it has not been all sunshine and rainbow at all. But one thing that is a beautiful, beautiful thing is how Nash and Cooper have been able to bring our Colombian children into our family. And when they're maybe a little bit hesitant or uncomfortable to give a hug to mom or dad or brother or sister, they know that they are loved unconditionally when Nash and Cooper goes to give them a hug. And so we're only 8 months into this thing with having them home, and to be able to see just them come along on this journey, this beautiful yet challenging adoption journey because of Nash and Cooper is truly a blessing. So you definitely have that to look forward to.
Thank you for sharing that. And I do appreciate too, I've listened to your podcast that you did with your wife explaining, I think she went to an aquarium and just the transparency of that, because adoption has always been on my heart too. But I love, that you're not just presenting all the good of it, but the reality of it on both sides. But then that's beautiful to hear that they're the bridge.
Yeah, they are the bridge. Most definitely. Coop, we adopted from China, and that couldn't have been a better adoption. I mean, it was just a very smooth adoption. Coop was just really smooth that way. And so it's only fair that we get our fair share of challenge and triumph with other adoptions. And so we're making up for a smooth adoption with Coop. Wonderful. Okay. So last question, before I let you go, I would love to hear something that you would like to share about Finley to the world. And maybe the world might guess this, or maybe they wouldn't, but what is something special and unique about your daughter that you want the world to know?
So I think just the fact that what I'd like people to know about Finley and everybody with Down syndrome is that regardless of what she can or cannot do, that she is worthy of life and that she is valuable. And I used to work as a patient advocate or client advocate at a pregnancy resource center. And we just really wanted to educate women about how valuable this baby they were carrying, every baby is. And I know as I've been learning about Down syndrome that the United States Congress last year came out with a stat that 65 to 85%, if not more, of babies with Down syndrome are being aborted. And most of that, from what I understand, is coming from the doctors recommending it. And so I just want everyone to know that these babies are precious and filled with love and life, just like every other baby. And she really has, like you said, been the glue to our family. So she has enhanced our family dramatically, and just the amount of love in our family is far greater than before she came.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad that you brought that up. I've thought about this a lot. And what I've found with those statistics, and I've seen even some statistics that are even significantly higher than that.
Yes.
I'm finding with these statistics is that in many cases, the mother and father were planning and wanting to have a child.
Yes.
And so this was a planned pregnancy. And so upon receiving diagnosis, just like you and just like myself, we had no point of reference as it relates to Down syndrome. Now, add on top of that, your trusted medical professional that is recommending that you terminate this pregnancy. So in
Yes.
a moment of extreme emotion, extreme fear, of weakness, of just really not understanding what this path is, and then
Right.
really that North Star, if you may, from a medical standpoint, guiding you and encouraging you, and not only just one, but multiple professionals encouraging the termination of the pregnancy, I can see how many children are being aborted that honestly, with a little bit of space and maybe a different type of message that would be
It-
delivered, would choose to keep that child. And we know what that looks like on the other side of that.
Right.
It is a beautiful, beautiful experience. And so that is something that I'm passionate about. And I'm very thankful that you brought that up and that you shared that.
Thank you. I'm excited that, Jack's Basket now has this medical curriculum that we could just hand over to our doctors and say, hey, check this out. And I think that's going to make a huge difference. And, it's just a lack of education. And hopefully once they have it and see these beautiful faces of these babies with Down syndrome, they'll see that they don't need to recommend that.
That's exactly right. Ashley, thank you for your work. Thank you for your example. Again, congratulations on your book, and thank you for being a guest on the show today.
Thank you. And thank you for everything you do.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Conquering Your Clownfish. If you liked what we discussed on the podcast today and want to continue the conversation, please visit us at conqueringyourclownfish.com. And please don't forget to subscribe.